So today, talking about concentration. Without having an exact definition, what do you think concentration means?
Kind of like, I don't know, like zoning in on something, like...
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
Zoning in on something, like focusing on something.
So focusing on something. How many of you use the word focus and concentration to kind of mean the same thing? Right? They're words that you could use. Similar, very similar. They're not exactly the same. A lot of people, and the way they talk about it in sports psychology, is concentration is being able to maintain over a long period of time. Right? Focusing is something very, very specific. Like if you're focusing on where you're going to hit the next ball, right? You're focusing on where you're going to try and hit the serve. Concentration might be how you're going to execute your game plan over the course of the entire match. So you can sometimes use the word to mean the same thing, but there is a little bit of a difference. So we're going to talk generally today about the concentration required for your tennis match or your practice. Let's face it, a lot of you are involved in practices that last either an hour and a half or 2 hours. That's a long time. You can't be 100% focused the whole time, but you can have good concentration throughout the practice. Okay? So the definition there's lots of different definitions, right? But the definition that I found from a cited source was the ability to pay attention to the important things going on while ignoring the unproductive or unimportant things. So it's basically you filtering out what's not important. Because there's so much going on, whether you're on the tennis court, whether you're in school, whether it's family life, there's the television, the internet, social media, there's so much going on that you can't possibly be able to concentrate on everything. You can't focus on, one thing while there's 10 million other things going on. You've got to find a way to filter out the things that aren't helping you. So we'll talk more about it at the end in terms of finding ways or things that you might be able to focus on versus the things that you don't want to focus on. But can anyone give me an example of some unproductive things that might come up during a tennis match that you don't want to be focusing on?
Mistakes.
Okay. So it's not necessarily the mistakes that are the unproductive thing.
Well, the reaction to
The reaction, right? So giving the mistakes too much attention. What else is unproductive for you to be thinking about during a tennis match?
Well, sometimes, like focusing too much on the other player.
Okay, that's good, right? So focusing too much on the opponent. What do you mean by that? But in what specific examples? Because you're absolutely right.
Like if your opponent is seems carefree or something, you might worry more and be less confident in yourself.
Reading too much into their body language, right? If they're looking extremely confident or they're walking around and they look like they've got everything in control, maybe that affects you negatively. So you want to try and not focus on the way that they're acting. You want to try and, by the same token, if they're being mean or they're being nasty or they're being, getting in your face about things, you can't worry about that. All you can do is handle how things are going on your side of the net. Yes, Ryan?
You don't want to focus on techniques you practice during practice.
So you don't want to focus on techniques, you said?
Techniques you worked on in practice, yeah.
So too much is the thing there. You want to be conscious of them, you want to think about them a little bit, but you don't want to overanalyze.
Yeah.
So you don't want, if you're missing your forehand, you don't want to start thinking too much about what's going on or why is this, where's my elbow, is my racket faced in, because then you're going to start overthinking and it can be unproductive. That's a good one.
get overexcited when you're winning. Think about winning the match instead of...
So focusing on the result.
Yeah.
That's not really productive, is it? Because really all you can control is what's going on at that moment, which might be the next point or even the next shot. So focusing on the results are productive. Dennis, you had your hand up. Do you have anything else? Okay. So think a bigger picture too. Just think you're on a tennis court It's a match outside. What other unproductive things could be a factor that you want to try and forget about?
Excuses, like the wind.
Well, exactly. So factors like the wind, right? We turn them into excuses, but the fact is there is wind. So worrying about the conditions, letting it, becoming too obsessed with, oh my God, I'm playing so badly, the wind's too much, the sun's in my eyes, right? What else? What else could distract you?
I used to play somewhere where there was a train station right there, and there were train horns like
Excellent.
all the time.
Train horns, other sounds, cars. If there's a freeway next to the courts, right? So all these other sounds that could distract you.
Players on the other courts.
Players on the other courts, whether they're making too much noise when they're playing, or whether they're arguing, whether they're whatever it might be. So other players, other people around. Anything else, guys?
Tournament draw.
The tournament draw, again, see how there's a theme with you right now. Results, opponents, tournament draws. So we're focusing a little too much on outcome, what's going to happen, instead of actually just addressing the one match at a time. It's a very good point. Happens all the time. So what do you notice about all of these distractions, though? Where are they?
Outside.
Outside.
Wait,
What do you mean by outside?
Sorry, externally, not internally.
No, but that's exactly where I was going, right? So they're outside, they're external. There are a lot of external distractions. Hang on, Dennis, I'll come to you. So if that's an example of external, what's the flip side of that? How else? What other distractions can there be?
Like expectations, like what people think will happen if you lose to like a certain person.
Okay, well hang on for 1 second, because now we're getting into the other side of things. But if it's the opposite of external, what is it?
Internal.
Internal. So pressure and expectations, we talked about that very early on. That, even though it's other people you're worrying about, it's internal. What other kind of stuff going on in terms of internal? And everyone who I work with on the tennis court is guilty of this at some point.
Like pain, like having pain in something.
Pain? Yeah, I suppose so. If you're carrying an injury and it's hurting and you're worrying about it. Sickness, yeah, that can all be happening. Now, the only reason I can't speak to the ladies in the room is because I haven't had a chance to work with them on the court yet. But all of you gentlemen in the front row have an example of negative what?
Oh, negative like emotions.
Negative emotions, negative self-talk. You talk to yourself in a negative way all the time. And that becomes a distraction. Yes, sir.
if you're like worried about something other than tennis.
Yeah, that's a big one, right?
Or something.
So you've come out for practice and you're trying to focus on hitting forehands and backhands, but yet you can't stop thinking about that test you've got in school tomorrow, right? Or that grade that you don't particularly like that you've got to tell your parents about. That's not a good one, is it? That happens all the time. It's happened to me.
No.
Plenty of times.
I don't know.
So when you're in that situation, and there's lots of negativity going on, or there's lots of distractions out there from other sources, what can you do? We'll talk again a little bit more later about ways to improve your concentration, but what is a quick fix for you to, especially with the negative self-talk, what can you do immediately to help you with your concentration?
Thought stopping.
So thought stopping, so in other words, trying to be positive, get rid of the negativity. So whether it's through thought stopping or whether you just have a way of turning it around, talking to yourself positively, right? And this is a bit cliche, it's overused, right? But a lot of the things you've talked about are things that have either happened in the past or things that could happen in the future with results or opponents. So what are you often advised to do? What does sports psychology talk about a lot? What does sports psychology talk about? If we're trying not to worry about what's already happened, and we're trying not to worry about things that haven't yet happened, where do we want to be? Say again?
Stay present.
Stay present. Stay in the moment. Right? That old cliche, 1 point at a time. Next point. Stop trying to think about other things that are going to get in your way. Right? The pressure and expectations, or having just missed 2 forehands in a row, or double faulted for the 3rd time this game. Whatever it might be, we have to try and put that aside. In other words, and this is something that you may or may not have heard, it's very, very common, right? What are the only things that you can control?
Your emotions and how you play.
I would go so far to say you can't even control how well you play. You can have an influence on how you play, but some days you play great, some days you don't, right? But you can have an influence on that. But you can control your emotions, which quite frankly is part of your attitude. So you can control your attitude. What else can you control?
Your behavior.
Again, part of your attitude. So it falls under the umbrella, but your behavior falls
Yourself.
under the attitude umbrella.
Yourself.
What do you mean by that? Be specific. So we've just talked about, so we are talking about controlling ourselves in terms of our attitude, right? What else can you control that's only on you?
Concentration. I know that's a broad topic.
Yeah, no, but concentration comes under the umbrella. There's 2 main umbrellas, right? We talk about a lot about attitude. Concentration is a little bit under attitude. Huh?
Your mind?
Okay, again, emotions and attitudes, but it begins with an E,
Emotions.
and then it has an F.
Empathy.
Effort. Can you control how well you're playing? Not 100%. But can you control how much effort you put into something?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right? If you're sick and you're feeling under the weather,
That's sort of different.
right?
I mean, you can put 100%, but it's
You
not.
can, yes.
It's not going to be 100%.
So you
of
can
your
give
ability.
100% of what you've got on that day. It may not be your normal 100%, but if you leave practices, matches, school, whatever you do, knowing that you've given 100% of what you've got on that day, no one can say anything to you. Period. Even if that's only 75% of what you normally can give, for whatever the reason might be. You might be overly tired. Maybe you didn't sleep the night before. Maybe you're sick. Maybe you've got so much other stuff going on, but you've given 100% of everything you can on that day, then you've absolutely done all you can in terms of effort. And then things like behavior, self-talk, body language, that all comes under the attitude, the way you're approaching something. Another way of saying it, which is very common, again, you may or may not have heard this before, it's controlling the controllables. Controllables is not a real word, but it's something that's used a lot in sports psychology. Control the controllables. What does that mean to you when we say that?
You can manipulate what you can manipulate. No, I'm just kidding. But you can, but whatever you have in your toolbox or whatever you have, accessible to you, whatever you can do at the moment, you try to do.
So anything that you are literally in control of, try and execute. The other stuff, what do you do with it?
Don't control it. You can't.
Just hope
You don't
it works.
Nothing. You don't focus on it. You don't waste your time. You don't waste your energy. You don't waste your effort. Things we all, myself included, everyone you know, spends time sometimes on things that are out of their control. Right? We want to have influence on things, and there's a grey area there because sometimes if you have better effort, if you have a better attitude, your level of tennis can improve even if you're having a bad day. Right? But there are some things that are completely out of your control. I cannot control whether you guys take this class seriously or not. I like to think that most of you are here to take it seriously. Right? And in fact, there are a couple of people that don't come to the class anymore who they decided that it wasn't right for them, and I completely understand that. You guys and girls are the ones that are here all the time. So it must mean something to you. I think that on some levels this is very important. Right? Who was here when Kevin Anderson was here?
Oh.
Girls missed out on that one.
Oh, he's here? Yeah.
Maybe I put you again.
So Kevin Anderson was practicing a few weeks ago. He came into one of our mental skills sessions, and I asked him the question, how important is mental skills to tennis? What was his response?
It's terrible.
What was his response? Don't ignore Jack. Jack's not telling the truth.
She says not important at all. You don't need it at all.
Alex, you're making this stuff
He
up.
said it's very
It's
important.
still cool.
Kevin Anderson said
That's
that
rubbish.
mental skills are extremely important to tennis, and the better that you get, the more mental the game gets. And you guys are all here to improve, right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to watch another video, and then we're going to close out with just a couple of things that we're going to work on our concentration.
So being able to focus and being able to concentrate effectively is absolutely key in high performance sport. There's so many different types of distractions that you've got to be able to tune out in order to concentrate well and compete well. I'm talking about hostile crowds, fatigue, internal doubts, external opinions and pressures. So if you want to improve your ability to concentrate and focus and avoid those kinds of distractions, then it's worth understanding how the mental process actually works so you can use some targeted techniques to improve. Good concentration is just the end result of controlling your attention when you perform. So just like you can't read a book and watch TV at the same time, it's really difficult to execute your technique well, or monitor your position, or link up with your teammates if you're also paying attention to unrelated or unimportant things. As humans, we only have a finite amount of attention. There's only so much data we can process at once. So any time that you're paying attention to something unrelated or unimportant, like doubt for example, you're wasting this precious resource and also creating a kind of mental interference that actual useful information has to fight its way through. When this happens, you don't process as quickly, your decision making becomes impaired, and the end result is you performing below your maximum level. A lot of the time this comes down to wasting your attention on distracting thoughts or doubts rather than focusing on what's happening in the real world. And sometimes it comes down to wasting attention on the wrong things out in the environment, out in the real world, rather than the things that you should be paying attention to and should be focused on.
The bloke in the green hat on the left was keeping his eye on Phelps, but he didn't have the strength to close the gap.
So with all that said, if you want to improve your concentration, there are a couple of good techniques that you can use to do this. Now that you know what's going on, first off, you can start and be really vigilant, alright? So if you get a breather or a break in play when you're performing, consider your current level of concentration. Are you getting distracted by stuff, or are you pretty well focused? Second, if you feel that you are getting distracted, or if you just want to maintain a high level of focus, then you can use some instructional self-talk. This is basically talking to yourself in your head or out loud and telling yourself what to do, what you should be focused on.
Every player I talk to myself.
It should be really specific and individual to you and your sport and the key aspects of your performance. Third, think about using some reminders before you go out and perform or during breaks in play if you get those in your sport. This could be like a page of notes or a photograph, something with meaning to you that's going to motivate you to avoid those distractions. This can be particularly effective if you know that there is that certain thing that gets to you or winds you up or distracts you. For example, you could have a reminder to take your match 1 point at a time or in 10-minute chunks rather than worrying about who's on top at a certain moment or who's going to win. Improving concentration is all about managing your attention, so just be mindful of where you spend yours when you're out there performing. Make sure it's on the right things. Talk to yourself, tell yourself what to focus on, use that instructional self-talk, and use those reminders to push yourself to avoid the distractions that you know you sometimes slip up on. The best way to get these techniques working for you is to use them in training as much as you can, and then put them into actual competitive events.
So that's a very general for lots of different sports, but you know, this guy has posted a few good videos. I happen to very much like the way he addresses things. He simplifies it.
Didn't we watch a video by him before?
Yes, we did.
What
Yes,
was
we
it
did.
on?
Can't remember exactly, but he's done a couple of good videos. I don't think it was visualization.
The stop loss.
Stopping, yeah.
Yeah, thought stopping.
Okay. So it was positive self-talk. In other words,
right.
So they talked about things that you can do, and some of them were very general for sports. Let's talk about, for the last few minutes here, in tennis, within your game. And again, it's got to be personal to you, because it doesn't work if it's not. what are some of the things that you can do on a tennis court in practice and matches to help improve your concentration, do you think? In other words, what's going to help you control the controllables and get rid of all the other stuff that's not important? Yes, sir?
Move my feet more.
Okay. So, moving your feet more, making sure that you're active, just so you're focusing on your movement rather than other stuff going on. Good.
After I have a bad point, I just need to think to myself and make this a habit of doing it, of saying, go on to the next point from
Okay.
the previous one.
So recovering, having a positive approach to your mistakes, which again is another subject we've talked about, and getting in good habits of moving on quickly,
Yeah.
right? Then focusing on the next point rather than what's just happened. So again, once it's gone, it's gone. I don't care if you hit a winner and you feel great about it, that's awesome. Or if you've hit the worst shot you can remember hitting in a long time and you're devastated by it, or is it the wrong time? Maybe you lost the set because you hit a bad shot. You must forget about it. Forget about the good and forget about the bad and just be ready for the next.
But it's hard to forget about like the good.
I know it is. If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Why forget about the good?
Why forget about the good? That's a great question. Why would you want to forget about the good while you're playing? Remember it for afterwards, tell all your friends, but right now, you've just won a point because you've hit the greatest shot you can remember hitting. Why is it important to forget about it and move on?
So you need to focus on the next point, you need to stay present.
Because you need to be present and think about the next point. Because if you're still thinking, wow, that was the greatest shot I've ever hit, and then they serve and you're not ready for it, then it
That's
affects
happened.
That next shot is
the
not
next
very
shot
good.
is not going to be as good. Exactly right. So I'm not saying don't enjoy hitting good shots. I'm not saying don't remember them afterwards. But don't put yourself in a position where you're distracted because you're still thinking about the amazing shot you hit.
I have to be all the time.
I didn't hit that many good shots, so it used to happen to me very rarely. But
Well, I mean, whenever I do hit a good shot.
I'm just messing. I'm just messing. What else? What else can you guys do to help you improve the concentration? Right, the guy talked in the video literally about talking to yourself. Having audible cues. Saying stuff to yourself. Okay, focus on the next one. Or, okay, here's where I'm going to serve, this is what's going to happen. Or make them play, just, again, something that's unique to you. Stuff that I said to myself may not be beneficial to you guys because it's just not going to make sense. Anything else? How about getting in good habits in the middle of practice? He said right up there, if you don't practice these good habits within your practices, you're never going to be able to execute in matches. So if your attitude is poor and your concentration is poor in practice, what do you think is going to happen in matches?
Bad stuff.
It's going to be poor. You can't do badly and practice bad things and then expect to play matches really, really well. It just doesn't work like that. Okay? One more thing that I have that I think is great, and sometimes we do this with groups. We'll do some fitness, we'll make you work really hard in the middle of a practice, and then we'll get you to play tired. Why is learning how to play tired good for your game?
Resiliency.
So you can become more resilient, right? Because it's really easy to lose focus and lose concentration when you're tired. And if you can find a way to learn how to play when you're tired and keep your concentration up, then you're going to be prepared for a situation when you've played a 2-hour match and everyone's tired. Maybe your focus and your concentration is better than your opponent's. Okay, anyone got anything they want to add? All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was a good class today. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. It's one of my favorite classes next week.